Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our next in the series of definitions webinars. My name is Jason Funderburg. I'm going to be moderating and asking some questions. I'm also joined by all of the tournament staff. Neil Gilman and Kirby Martin are going to be helping answer questions in the questions tab. And Chris Roselle is going to be presenting today. Before we get started, just want to give everyone a reminder that today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the GAP website at gapgolf.org/gap-webinars. Another reminder is we do encourage questions. So if you see that questions tab in your window pane there, please feel free to send them along to us. If we don't get a chance to ask it out loud, we will either reply in the message portal there or send you an email after the fact. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Chris Roselle, Tournament Director. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time today to join us.
Jason, thank you very much for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for attending today. Today's webinar is going to bounce back and forth between a bunch of different different definitions, and that's why it's labeled as miscellaneous. So we're going to be covering a handful of terms that are defined in the rules of golf. And the title for this webinar is Who Has the Honor? So our first definition that we are going to go over is going to be honor. We're also going to talk about equipment, equipment rules, what constitutes a round, whether or not a ball has moved, known or virtually certain, a stroke, and advice. So our first term today is honor. And honor is the right of a player to play first from the teeing area. And that's an important thing to understand, is honor just deals with when you are on the teeing area. If you need some more information about honor, you want to look at Rule 6.4. Once we leave the teeing area, that term goes away. Again, it is just a term that is used to describe who plays first from the teeing area. The next term is equipment. Equipment is anything used, worn, held, or carried by the player or the player's caddy. So there's a distinction made there that it's, again, both the player and the player's caddy. And objects that are used to care for the course, such as bunker rakes, which during this time we're probably not using all that often. But bunker rakes, when they are being used by the player or carried by the player or the player's caddy, they are considered equipment. If they're just lying on the ground next to a bunker, they're not considered equipment. The tee. A tee is an object used to raise a ball above the ground to play it from the teeing area. And again, it must be no longer than 4 inches, and it has to conform with the equipment rules. Again, the tee, again, is used within the teeing area, but as you'll see, if you read the rules, there's nothing in the rules that say that you have to use a tee within a teeing area. But if you do use a tee, again, it can't be longer than 4 inches, and it must conform with the equipment rules. You can throw the ball down on the ground within the teeing area. You can raise up a piece of turf within the teeing area and use that as a tee. But if you use a tee, again, no longer than 4 inches and conform with the equipment rules. And those equipment rules are specifications and other regulations that are used for clubs, balls, and other equipment that players are allowed to use during a round. And these are found on the USGA website. They are not within the Rules of Golf book. They are found at the USGA website. So we, at certain events that we administer, primarily USGA qualifiers, we have the 1 ball rule in effect. And not all the time, but every so often a player might come up to us and ask us whether or not his or her golf ball conforms, and we would go to the USGA website and look at their conforming golf ball list. The final slide here before we take some questions is what constitutes a round of golf. And the definition of a round is 18 or fewer holes played in the order set by the committee. So in gap events, we either start off the first tee or the 10th tee, depending upon the size of the field. And the round of golf is 18 or fewer holes played in that order. So if you start on the first hole, you end on the 18th hole. If you start on the 10th hole, you end on the 9th hole. Rounds can be less than 18 holes, but they can't be more than 18 holes. So in a situation where we have a stroke play playoff following an 18-hole round of golf, that first playoff hole is considered a completely separate round. It's not part of the round played before. It's a completely separate round. So Jason, do we have any questions so far?
None so far. A little slow to
Okay.
get the ball rolling here, but we can keep moving and hopefully we'll get some for the next section.
Yeah, the next couple of sections have some topics that might yield a few more questions. So now we're going to talk about a golf ball that has moved. And the term moved within the rules of golf is kind of defined as a legal fiction because for a ball to have moved, it has to be at rest and leave its original spot and come to rest on any other spot. And this can be seen by the naked eye, whether or not actually anybody sees it. So if you look at these two blue golf balls over on the right here, the first one has moved to a new location and has come to rest in that new location. The ball on the bottom, even though it technically did move, it returned to its original location. So under the rules, that ball has not actually moved. And again, this applies whether the ball has gone up or down or horizontally in any direction away from its original spot. So you see the ball here on the bottom moves down, and that is considered to have moved. So if you think about a situation where maybe a ball is perched up on some in the rough and is perched up, fairly high on top of the rough, if it moves downwards, that is considered to have moved because again, a ball is considered to have moved if it goes up or down in any direction away from its original spot. Now, if the ball at rest only wobbles, which again is termed as oscillating, and it stays on or returns to its original spot, this ball is not considered to have moved. So again, if you watch this ball here, again, it oscillates and it returns to its original spot, the ball has not moved. And you'll see that fairly commonly if you're on the putting green on a windy day and the ball is kind of shaking. Provided that it doesn't change its spot and it returns to its original location, that ball is not considered to have moved. Okay, now, known or virtually certain. And this is something that is discussed a lot when we are dealing with penalty areas. And it is the standard for deciding what has happened to a player's ball. For example, whether the ball has come to rest in a penalty area, and that could be a red or a yellow penalty area, or whether it has moved or what has caused it to move. So again, if we see this ball on the putting green here, we see that the ball has moved. It has changed its location from its original spot. So this term, known or virtually certain, is what we use to decide what has happened to the player's ball. And it means more than just possible or probable. It means that there is either conclusive evidence that the event in question happened to the player's ball, such as when the player or other witnesses saw it happen. So if you are playing on a hole that has a lateral water hazard down the left-hand side, and a player in your group hits his or her ball into that lateral water hazard, and you see the ball splash, well, that would be considered conclusive evidence that the ball in question is in the lateral penalty area. So we have knowledge or virtual certainty in that situation. Or there is a very small degree of doubt, and all other reasonable available information shows that it is at least 95% likely that the event in question happened. So in that situation where you're playing a hole that has a lateral penalty area, and let's say one of the players in your group hits his or her ball to the left, let's say you don't see it splash, but 95 times out of 100, that ball is going to be in that lateral penalty area. Well, then we have knowledge or virtual certainty that the ball is in the penalty area. So again, even though we didn't see it splash, if there's no other place for that golf ball to be, 95 times out of 100, we have knowledge or virtual certainty. And again, all reasonable information includes all information the player knows and all other information he or she can get with reasonable effort and without unreasonable delay. Okay, Justin, any questions?
Yeah, I've got some rolling in here, Chris. First one is asking you to talk about the distinction between a stroke play new round and a match play continuation of the round for going more than 18 holes.
Okay, so in match play, let's start off with that first. In match play, you actually, there's a couple of different things that can happen. If you take the Ryder Cup, for example, matches in the Ryder Cup can end tied or all square. So you don't actually have a winner in that situation. It all depends on what the committee decides they want to do as far as resolving ties in match play. So in match play, like let's say for the BMW Amateur Championship, we resolve ties in match play. So we have players, if they are all square or tied after 18 holes, go to an extra hole, which is considered a continuation of the round. But in stroke play, if we have a stroke play playoff to break a tie, that actual playoff is considered a new round. It's not part of the original round. So in match play, it really all depends upon what the committee has decided as far as how they want to break ties. And they could keep the match tied like they do in the Ryder Cup and award a half a point to each individual player, or they could determine how they want that match resolved by sending it to a continuation of holes.
Perfect. Well, Chris, a lot of our questions were actually pertaining to that topic. So okay. I think you were pretty thorough, and that's I say we should just keep it going.
Okay.
Hey, Chris.
Moving on. Oh, yeah. Yes, Curb.
Hey, can I just interject something there? Like the term round, you might even consider a little bit more of a stroke play connotation. And in match play, you would say we have an 18-hole match, right? And if the match is tied, we will continue the match. If we're going to try to see if there's a winner, like in our club championships, when we need to have a winner to move to the next part of the bracket. So just kind of a separation there. The term round is about 18 holes or fewer, and that's about putting a score on the board for a round. Where in match play, the score doesn't really matter. So if the match goes more than 18 holes, all that matters is that we have a winner.
Yep. Good term, Curb.
Hey, Chris, before we get moving, had one quick question on the last subject of slides. So they were asking if you could tell us various situations where a ball moving on the green could occur and what would happen specifically when that does.
Okay, sure. So in a situation where a player accidentally, let's say, moves his or her golf ball on the putting green, Let's say that a player is going to mark his or her ball on the putting green and accidentally moves his or her ball. Under the new rules, we now are, first of all, not penalized, and we must return the ball to its spot on the putting green. But we could also have situations where, let's say we are walking up to the putting green and a gust of wind blows our golf ball to a new location on the putting green. Without getting too in-depth, because we'll be talking about this in some future webinars, if a ball is moved by a natural force on the putting green, i.e., let's say wind, and it has not been marked, we're going to go ahead and play it from where the wind moved it to. Now, if the ball had been marked and we had replaced it and the wind moved the golf ball, in that situation, we are going to replace the ball on its original location, because once we mark the ball on the putting green, we own that spot. But if we accidentally cause the ball to move on the putting green, let's say, like I said, in the process of marking it, or let's say we accidentally kicked it on the putting green, all accidental movements of the ball on the putting green, we are going to replace the ball on its original location.
Great, thanks, Chris. I think we're good with questions now. Okay.
Moving on, we are going to talk about what defines a stroke under the rules of golf. And just want to give a little shout out to my 10-year-old daughter here for helping me out with the presentation. The definition of a stroke is the forward movement of the club made to strike the golf ball. And the key term there is the forward movement of the club made to strike the ball. And this is what it looks like. So again, as you can see there, the forward movement of the club made to strike the ball, that is considered a stroke. But a stroke has not been made if the player decides during the downswing not to strike the golf ball. So Tiger Woods is really, really good at this. And he has the uncanny ability to check his downswing when he decides not to strike the golf ball. So as you can see, my daughter here, she's making a deliberate stop of the swing in the downswing as to not strike the golf ball. So in that situation, she has not made a stroke. Even though the forward movement of the club has been made, she decided during her downswing not to strike the golf ball. Now, what you can also do in that situation is you can, if you are unable to stop, you can deliberately miss the golf ball. And this is my daughter, again, trying to deliberately miss the golf ball. Oops, again, my computer is freezing here. Give me a second. So as you can see there, she deliberately missed the golf ball in that situation. I asked her to swing the club head above the ball in a deliberate action to try and miss the golf ball. So in that situation, she has not made a stroke because she deliberately tried to miss the golf ball. So moving on here. And finally, if you accidentally strike the ball when making a practice swing or while preparing to make a stroke, we are not to have considered made a stroke. And here's Keegan Bradley at the US Open at Pinehurst. We saw him yesterday. And then here's Keegan setting up to hit a tee shot. And if that happens in your local group at your club, you probably make the joke that he's made a stroke and you say 1. But Keegan accidentally struck the golf ball while preparing to make a stroke. So we are not going to count that as a stroke. And he will be permitted to re-tee the golf ball. And again, he'll be playing his first stroke in that situation. So again, if he accidentally strikes the ball, if he was making a practice swing within the teeing ground or while preparing to make a stroke, it's not considered to be a stroke, and he's allowed to replace his golf ball on the tee if he'd like.
Hey, Chris.
Watch.
Could you just go over what might happen if somebody did that in the general area?
Okay, so if we were in the general area, we have some slightly different rules that apply. If we accidentally move our golf ball within the general area, unfortunately, we are going to be penalized 1 stroke and have to replace the ball on the spot unless certain things were taking place, like searching for a golf ball. Or again, if you were marking your golf ball under a rule that allows you to mark your golf ball and you accidentally move it, you wouldn't be penalized. But if you're just walking down, let's say, the middle of the fairway and aren't paying that much attention to where you're walking, and you accidentally kick your golf ball that's in play, you are going to be penalized, unfortunately, 1 stroke, and you are going to have to replace the golf ball in that situation. Now, if you were, let's say, again, in the right rough and you were searching for your golf ball, you don't know where it is, and you accidentally move your golf ball while searching for it, we are not going to be penalized in that situation. We're still going to have to replace the ball where it was, but we are not going to be penalized in that situation. Kirby, does that jive with you?
Yeah, I just wanted to make the distinction, Chris, that there's a difference between accidentally moving your ball on the teeing ground and the putting green, the general area, and the bunker. So yeah, you got it.
Okay. Yeah, and there's also situations if you're in the bunker, let's say, and your ball is covered by loose impediments, and again, you're searching for your golf ball in a bunker, and you accidentally move your golf ball while searching for it. Again, you'll be permitted with no penalty to replace your golf ball. Okay, so the final topic we're going to discuss today is advice. Advice is any verbal comment or action, such as showing what club was just used to make a stroke, that is intended to influence a player in either choosing a club, making a stroke, or deciding how to play during a hole or round. Now, one of the things to understand about advice is there are certain people that are allowed to give you advice during your round. Number 1 would obviously be your caddy, if you have a caddy. Number 2 would be a partner of yours if you're playing in a, let's say, a 4-ball or a foursomes competition. Any advice between you and your caddy or you and your partner in 4-ball or foursomes is perfectly okay. But advice, again, if you're asking, again, a person that you're playing with about what club they're using to make a stroke, then we're going to have some issues, or deciding how to play during a hole or a round. That's okay to do with your caddy or a partner, but not anybody else. Now, advice does not include public information, such as the location of things on the course, like the hole, the putting green, the fairway, penalty areas, bunkers, or another player's golf ball. So you can see in the picture on the right here, you have player A asking player B how far away from the hole he is. And player A looks at the sprinkler head and says 158 yards. That is considered public information and is not considered advice. Now, if you take this to the modern era that we have with yardage finders, let's say, and let's say player A doesn't have a yardage finder and player B does, and player A and player B are in a very similar spot, and player B shoots the yardage to the flag and it's 158 yards. Again, it's perfectly okay for player A to ask player B how far he got with his yardage finder. Again, that's considered public information, yardage. Again, the distance from one point to another, that's that yardage idea. Also, the rules, if you ask another player about the rules, that's not considered advice. Things that would be considered advice is if you tell the player that you think he or she should proceed under this certain rule or this certain procedure, but just asking questions on the rules, i.e., you know, how do I take relief from an immovable obstruction? That's not considered advice. Any questions about that, Jason?
I got a question here from John Young. Are you penalized for picking up a ball to identify it without first marking it?
Yeah, so in that situation, John, in order to identify your golf ball, that's one of the situations where you must mark the golf ball before you pick it up to identify it. One of the changes to the rules now is you don't have to tell anybody else that you are marking your golf ball and lifting it to identify it, but you still have to mark before you lift it for identification purposes.
Even during a search, he followed up with?
Yes, even during a search, yes. You are still, again, if you see a golf ball in 4-inch rough and you think that it is your golf ball, but you're not sure, you have to mark the golf ball before you pick it up and look at it to confirm whether or not it is yours.
Great. So we're a little light on questions here. Just want to remind everyone that today's session is recorded. We will be posting that later today as we get some more rolling in. So I got a question here. Are you obligated to share yardage obtained from a rangefinder outside of good sportsmanship?
Outside of good sportsmanship. No, I mean, there's nothing in the rules that says you have to share yardage with somebody else. I don't know if I'd be too keen with playing with somebody else that wouldn't be, helpful in just giving me a yardage. But at least I don't believe there's anything within the rules, unless it is something that's a part of the code of conduct that a committee has adopted. What do you think, Herb? Or Neil?
Yeah, Chris, I would just echo what you said. It's probably good sportsmanship and within the spirits of the game, but there's nothing, like you said, in the rules of golf that you're obligated to share that yardage.
Yeah, yeah.
I got a follow up here on that last question about the search. What if player B searches for player A's ball and picks it up without identifying, to identify without marking?
So if player B, and we're talking about an individual stroke play competition, if player B picks up player A's golf ball while searching, that's a good one. You think about that one real quick. So if player B was player A's partner, let's say it was a 4-ball competition, then we would have some issues because player A is responsible for what his partner does. And if it turns out to be player A's ball in that situation, then there would be a penalty involved. If it's an individual stroke play event, I'm gonna think about that one.
Hey, Chris,
Yeah.
if it's not his, if we're not searching for player B's ball and he picks up a ball to identify it, we don't have any issues. He's just going to put it back. He's an outside agency to the other player. And we're just going to put it back. I don't think player B should be picking up people's balls if we're searching for player A's ball, but I don't think we have any issue there.
Yep.
In stroke play.
I agree with that. In stroke play, yeah. In stroke play, you're right.
That looks like that's a wrap on our questions here. Folks, before we end it today, I want to thank you all for attending, taking time out of your day. Just want to keep you informed that there are more webinars coming next week, definitions webinar. There is a little bit of a change to that schedule, which we'll be emailing out to everyone who registered. Just keep an eye out for that. I believe Neil will be presenting on Monday. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to us if something pops in your head a little bit later. Chris, Kirby, Neil, thank you all for joining us today, taking the time to give us a presentation and answer some of our questions. Without further ado, thank you all again, and have a great day.